All right, folks, I think we'll go ahead and get started. Merrick, if you're ready, I see you are in chat. First of all, Merrick, thank you very much for joining. Very much appreciate it. Looks like a very interesting syllabus. This is on Nullsec Fleet Command and Tactics. And I know we have a number of guests from TEST here as well. Welcome. I'm very glad that you're here. We will be recording this, so we'll be posting this to the Eve University class library the next couple of days. If you haven't done so already, please check your Mumble settings. Make sure you have push-to-talk enabled or mute yourself in chat. Merrick, I think, is going to ask for Q&A later on, too, so we'll probably have some other dialogue going on shortly. Also, join lecture.e-uni, which is the in-game chat channel where you can post questions and cut up and have fun. So join lecture.e-uni. And with that, Merrick, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you very much, Neville, and thank you very much to Eve University for giving me this chance to go ahead and provide a little lecture for everyone today. If you go ahead and look in the lecture.e-uni, I have went ahead and linked the syllabus page in the wiki for Eve University for you. Basic start out, we're going to go ahead and start off with the overview. All these things are going to be very generic and general. I'm not going to give out any fleet compositions or anything, but I will go ahead and bring up some basic fleet compositions that I found are generically used in Eve. What fleet types to use, this will be based on the common used doctrine. How to properly post a planned strategic operation. Preparation of target systems by recon elements to include safe spots, sino spots, and perches. Basic tactics to use with common fleet compositions. Flight or fight. When is it time to make that judgment call? And fleet communications and discipline. Now, when doing ops out in Nullsec, there are a few things to remember before going into planned operations. First and foremost is your enemy. You need to go ahead and ask yourself if having at least some type of intel on your enemy, including their active time zones and backgrounds in past battles, is relevant. Yes, it is. You can go ahead and get a lot of this information, especially battle reports, by looking on evekill.org. You can go directly to search, and you can put in corporation or alliance names, and it should give you a list out of battle reports for them. Is the enemy going to be able to raise a reaction fleet to your attack? How will they get to the fight? Along with that being in Nullsec, is there a possibility of capital escalation from the enemy? This is especially important when you're attacking structures or their sovereignty directly via by SBUing their system, by attacking their iHubs and territorial claim units, along with any stations or outposts that are in the system. As we all know, Nullsec has much different rules than Empire and LowSec. The biggest of those, especially in fleet combat, is being able to use warp disruption bubbles and the use of your interdictors and heavy interdictors, along with the favorable possibility of any capital class ships. This is to include everything from dreadnoughts and carriers all the way up to the super capital class, being your super carriers and titans. Another is the use of jump bridges and titan bridges. Jump bridges are structures that are anchored directly to player-owned structures, which will be your passes. Those are used to make jumps by any system with the proper sovereignty level and upgrades that allow travel vast distances very quickly. And titan bridges, which can be done by the alliances that own the different sovereignties in the area. This can also be done to any place in LowSec or Nullsec via a sinusoidal field generator on ships. Fleet types. First thing I always do after getting designated a target, either by your military directorate or by the director themselves, is to think about what type of fleets I want to use for this operation. That's going to depend primarily upon what type of operation it is, whether it's a roam or whether it's going to be a planned structure shoot. Along with that, I look at what type of fleet composition I want for the overall goal, whether we'll be taking down a POS or we'll be going in to take sovereignty. from the system, which generally in sovereignty warfare means we are going to go ahead and reinforce the iHub, information hub, and we're going to be attacking their station, which is considered sovereignty structure there. This is extremely important in those two instances, since those two structures themselves have multiple timers to them. It's not just a shield timer like a player-owned structure tower. They actually have an armor and a shield timer, and those need to be looked into and scheduled for further ops as you make success within the system. The different type of things you're generally looking for in your fleet comp is having fast tackle. That's going to be your faster frigates and interceptors that will be tackling hostile ships. Along with that, you're going to be looking at your intel. Basic intel beforehand is going to be, who am I attacking? What type of fleets have they fielded in the past? If this is a structure shoot, do I want to go ahead and look at the possibility of capitals and a much larger force being sent against me? Along with that, how long I think I have when I'm attacking those structures. If it's a roam and you're going through their systems, there's a little more flexibility on that depending on where you're going. If you're just roaming through their space looking for a fight, generally reaction forces are kind of small depending upon your fleet comp, all the way up to being a large overwhelming force, especially with the location of their staging systems or even their jump bridge access. Along with that, you want to look at, if you're attacking a specific system, having your covert or recon elements available, a system, two systems, sometimes even three systems out. If your intelligence has worked properly, you will have some idea of their jump bridge network availability and possibly have a recon element in that system looking for a fleet composition and a fleet size jumping into you. Along with that, what we do in Nullsec a lot of times, especially with the higher up echelon fleet commanders and even the military command and recon elements, is we know who our enemies are generally, and we try to go ahead and have a full list of their available and known supercap and Titan pilots for us. If we see them logging in, and this has worked in the past, we know that we will be expecting some type of super capital element into the fight itself. Now, once you get your operation, you have some sort of intelligence, the next thing to do is go ahead and post your planned strategic operation. The primary way we do this, and a lot of the Nullsec alliances do this, is directly through our forums. We have a section set up, and a lot of times we have a calendar set up for these fleets. Along with that is getting some type of announcement out there. We use a Jabber system, an IRC server, that allows specific people, including Echelon FCs, to go ahead and broadcast directly to all of our people and let them know before the fights happen. When you go ahead and make your posting for your strategic operation, there's always some information you want out there. When you post it, what you want to do is go ahead and give an exact date and time for the operation itself. What the fleet name will be in the Fleet Finder. Fleet Finder is an invaluable tool both for the common player and the FC. It allows you to go ahead and advertise your fleet immediately, where everybody can go ahead and find it and join it with the proper standings, of course, and the proper ships. your fleet type you're going to be using, along with any specific ships you want to use. In some fleets, this is very important. If you're calling for tacklers, you want to put on there your fast tackle, your interceptor, and sometimes we even get into other specific kinds of tackles, such as in the Stabber Fleet issue, which is commonly used as a heavy tackler in your armored heavy assault cruiser fleets. Where the form-up will be held, whether it's at a POS structure, a station, or a celestial within your home system. What time the form-up is. This is different than the time of your actual fleet operation. You want to give at a minimum a half hour. If you are expecting this to be a large strategic operation, you may want to start an hour back, starting to advertise the fleet and getting your fleet together and to the form-up area. Your voice communications information. This is going to be either Mumble, TeamSpeak, or one of the other various servers that the different alliances use out there. You want to make sure you have the fleet name and your channel in there, exactly which type of channel you're going to be using. General purpose. This is kind of a free-form area, depending upon what your alliance wants. You can either put in there the operation name in some cases, and in some of the posts we've put pictures in there linked directly to our forum, along with a paragraph or two of the what, when, how, and why we're going to do this. Reimbursement status. Depending upon your alliance and whether they have a reimbursement program or not, along with whether the fleet commander and the military directorate have deemed this to be a reimbursable operation. You can advertise ahead of time whether this will be a fully reimbursable operation or whether it will be reimbursable for specific types of ships. Now, once you've got all that down, you've got it scheduled, we go to the preparation of your target system. This is really the unsung work of any block level FC, and this is something that we in test go ahead and try to teach our lower echelon FCs, especially when they start moving up towards the higher up echelons where they can see themselves possibly running or even running these strategic operations. This is extremely important, especially when you're talking about sovereignty battles over systems. This is where your recon gets in there. Recon is the unsung heroes of any military doctrine, especially the military command. These guys work tirelessly in their COVOPs and recon class ships to get us the information we need and the bookmarks we need to make these operations successful. A lot of this tends to be having them go through the system and scout structures and targets beforehand. We want them to, if we're shooting a player-owned structure, we want to see what type of hardeners they have on it, along with that, what type of defenses they have. A lot of times we already know, especially if we're going after a POS structure to take the moon, what type of moon material is being mined out of there, and sometimes we'll even have them verify that or make sure that it is doubly verified. Have them make some safe spots, both on the grid, which is the player-owned structure you'll be shooting, usually, or else the sovereignty structure. We generally go ahead and try to have our recons give us a couple different warp-ins for the initial attack. Usually it'll be within 250 to 500 kilometers off the structure, generally on the same grid, so we have some place that we can initially warp the whole fleet into before actually engaging the structure. In the possibility that there are going to be capital class vessels used for POSs or the structures, which would be your dreadnoughts and or super capital class, we want to go ahead and allow them a Sino Sorrel field spot where they'll be able to Sino in. Sometimes we even use those Sino spots to directly bridge the fleets in from a Titan, thereby avoiding a lot of transport through gates and possibly into gate camps, running into bubbles if it's within jump range of our Titans. If you're having a bomber element for this operation, you are expecting a fight. You want to make sure that your bombers have their warp-in spots where they will be warping in to release their bombs, and then their egress, which is their outbound, either to a celestial or another bookmark, or even to another recon who's set up far off grid to allow them to come in, drop their bombs, and head on out to help with the fleet fight. Generally, your fights in Nullsec tend to be at a standoff distance. With the larger battleship class vessels and some specialized battle cruisers, we find the fleet fights tend to be anywhere from 50 to even 100 kilometers separating the fleets. This is especially important when you're dealing with some of the fleet compositions that I will go into a little bit later. All right, do I have any questions so far? All right. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open this up to a little bit of a free-form Q&A with some of the basic tactics used with your common fleet compositions. No, Terry, I don't have a neck beard. I have a goatee. All right, does anybody have any questions they'd like to ask about any tactics used in Nullsec combat? Feel free to go ahead and X up on the lecture, and I will call you out, and you can ask them directly on the mumble.
What's the difference between a tower and a station?
The biggest difference between the towers and stations, such as an outpost or player-built stations, passes such as in towers generally only have one reinforce. Once you get them down to a 75% shield or below, they go into a reinforced mode for anywhere up to 1 day and 16 hours on a large tower. After that, you can go back to that.
What's the difference? Not the reinforced thing.
Biggest difference would be the number of hit points. Stations, along with your sovereignty structures, iHubs, and territorial claim units, have a huge amount of hit points above and beyond what you can get a tower to have. Towers generally have a static number of hit points. They can be increased by adding shield hardening units directly to the POS themselves inside the POS, thereby negating some of the damage given to them and making them harder to kill. All right, Rassish. I see you have a question. With these big distances, how does the tackling happen? A lot of times when you're in standoff fleets, generally within 50 to 80 kilometers, one fleet will use specialized tacklers such as Huggins and Lachesis, along with fleet bonuses to try to web or warp scramble target ships at the long distances they're given. With faction points and bonuses, you can get some webs and warp scramblers out to 60 plus kilometers. Once you get somebody tackled, the fleet generally tends to try to get into a distance to be able to make very short work of them, either by directed fire. All right, Claudia, question: how does the exact tack to a POS start? Like, which ships after recon enter to the zone when all intel are covered properly? Does all fleet jump in at once, or like waves in an order? Generally, we have that decided beforehand. If the system is within Titan bridging distance, and we have a Titan in recon or a scout in system beforehand, we will go ahead and try to use a Titan bridge directly into the system. Sometimes we'll use Titan bridges to get within the system next door or a couple systems out. Then the fleet will proceed as a whole unit into the target system and attack the target structure directly. All right, Frood Froster, hopefully I'm saying that correct. How would you counter kiting battle cruiser fleets when you don't have access to warfare links in your fleet? Generally what we like to do is have some ships in fleet that can use combat probes. We will try to either directly warp into a spot that they warp onto, either on grid or sometimes even off grid if they're warping to a nearby celestial. We generally try to kite them ourselves, either warping in and out to safe spots made by fast-moving interdictors or other type of ships. All right, Reverend Apocalypse, is ECM a viable way for new players to get into these fleets and the right ships with range of 100 kilometers, for example? Actually, yes. We encourage a lot of our newer players to go ahead and train up ECM to get into Blackbirds. They're an excellent ship. They're very low cost. With a little bit of the proper skill, they can ECM out to 60 to 75 kilometers with fall off. Even though ECM ships tend to be targeted almost immediately as soon as they get on the field, if they can get those jammers on a ship, especially, say, the enemy's logistics, that helps immensely. A lot of times we, even in some of our doctrines, have our ships have a utility slot that we can go ahead as FCs and request that they put a specific jammer in if we know what type of fleet we're going into. All right. Igaro has a question. Are your recons mainly in corp or out of corp? Most alliances have their own different recon squad or groups set up. And as FC's military directorate, we have a direct communication line with them where we can ask them to investigate a system, or we can go ahead and put a request of order in to have them investigate a target system. A lot of times, if you're in an older alliance or you have an on-the-spot recon, which, God bless tests we do, we have a lot of that information available for us immediately, including bookmarks that we can be given to make our job a lot easier with set up safe spots and recon already available and intel on the spot. Claudia's question, does sort of zerging into a system cause connection issues? If it does, affect both sides in the same amount? It used to. In the larger fleet fights, say 600, 800, even 1,000 people in the same system, the defender, especially if they have defenses set up for your op, generally are at advantage. Nowadays, with the introduction of time dilation, no, it is not an issue. A lot of times when you're jumping a large fleet in and you're going to know you have a time dilation factor, you have your fleet go ahead and hold their cloaks. That means they're staying absolutely still. They're not activating any modules or doing any type of movement at all. You have a 30-second cloak once you jump into a new system, which is true in Empire and is true in Nullsec. We use that to our advantage to get our whole fleet into system and see what type of position the enemy has so that we can immediately counter it, whether it's going to a pre-planned safe spot we have in system, or if the enemy fleet is close enough and you have a fleet comp that's built on long-distance damage, we can attack them immediately. The FC gives an order to go ahead and the whole fleet decloak and go ahead and go at them directly, calling targets immediately.
Hi, Herder.
What's up?
All right, last question I'll take by Scottish Warrior. When spies on comms, etc. are concerned, what is a viable way to communicate with the fleet if you suspect that information is being passed on to the enemy, and what about counterintelligence? That's a really good question. That depends on how your communications are set up. A lot of times, alliances use an elaborate way to vet or verify who's on communications. You're always going to have spies in any large alliance. Somebody's always going to sneak through the cracks, go ahead and find a way through the holes, and get into your comms. If you do suspect you have somebody on your comms who is leaking information directly to your enemy, you might try going ahead and using your fleet broadcast tool, which has tools for aligning and warping to any celestial. You can use your direct fleet chat to go ahead and type out directions. But once it happens, you kind of have to deal with it, and it's something all larger alliances and power blocks live with. There's spies in there. You just have to get over it, proceed with the fight, and try to get the information out there that you think is necessary that can try to avoid having your whole fleet blown up.
The herder is in FC2. Maybe he can say something.
What's up? I just got here.
There you go, Ned.
All right, guys, let's hold off on that. All right, I'm going to come down to Section 5 on the syllabus, which is fight or flight. There comes a time in every fleet battle where the FC has to make that tactical decision. Usually it's immediately whether to stand your ground, go ahead and fight if you believe that you have the fleet comp to engage any resistance, or whether it's time to go ahead and cut out, retreat, wait for reinforcements, or completely call the mission off and return back home. A lot of times this is done by experience, knowing what you're up against. One of the biggest things you can do as an FC to help yourself and understand fighting, this is in Nullsec, Empire, or Lowsec, is knowing the different abilities of your different ships. Doing this will make a huge difference. If you know that you are in a battlecruiser class fleet and you suddenly find yourself going up against a battleship class fleet with the ability to reach out and hit you from long distance, it may be time to see if you can use your probers, if they're available, to try to get directly on top of them and brawl it out, or whether it's time to call in for reinforcements. And a lot of times, if the battle is going the wrong way and you see that you are basically in a pickle over a barrel, whether it's your fleet's been bubbled and you trying to burn out of the bubbles to find their interdictors are bubbling your path, to try to find another way out of there. A lot of times it's a judgment call by the FC, and it's based on his experience in the overall tactical picture you're up against. The last thing I'll cover is fleet communications and discipline. As I went ahead and mentioned earlier, every alliance, even corps, should have some type of dedicated voice server. A lot of times it's TeamSpeak, Mumble, or any other various types. Fleet commanders, when they're leading fleets, must have some type of basic administrative rights to control these fleets. At a minimum, and we found this works very well, especially with the higher echelon FCs, trusted people, they should have the right to priority speaker. That allows you to talk over everybody else. With TeamSpeak, and especially with Mumble, it allows your voice to carry over and drops the volume of everyone else's voice. Mute, whether you can mute individual players on the channel or whether you just feel like you need to mute the whole channel out directly. And that's dependent upon how your alliance feels how operations go. Along with that, allowing the FC to have command channel access. This is an access where the FCs can speak to the various other channels available, whether it's having a sub-channel in the main fleet channel that allows the fleet commanders to talk among themselves, talk to their recon that are out there. If there is a capital class element in your operation, it'll allow you to speak directly to the capital FC for their Sino drop-ins, and along with that, to see how operations are going. Once they're done, they're ready to go ahead and cap their ships up and jump out and clear the field. Fleet discipline. This is a subject where you will get a million different responses, such as that. At a minimum, your FC should be allowed to go ahead and lead their fleet in the way they seem fit. A lot of times, the FC should be getting respect from their players, especially when they're leading the fleets, to be able to give the orders that are required. There are times when you can free up the comms to allow everybody to talk as they please. A lot of that is based upon your alliance and how they see it go. There are some alliances out there, I won't mention any names, that once they get into fleets, the channel's locked down. Everybody's muted except for the FC. Nobody's allowed to talk. Along with that, even their fleet windows, such as we have with this chat, is kept clear for FCs and recons to give the information they need to give. A lot of times, the distractions are unwarranted, sometimes wanted. You know, even in pest, we have a pretty free-form comms when needed. We allow people to talk, post as they need be, the FCs when they need to get control of those comms very quickly. Now, a lot of the bigger alliances allow you to go ahead and wreak out your own discipline in fleets. I've gone so far as having sing to the whole fleet when they do something wrong, such as in jump through a gate before the fleet goes ahead and does it, it's ordered, or mess things up. And sometimes there are some instances where it has to be escalated up the chain, either to a friendly corp or even directly up to the Alliance Command to have a player dealt with, especially in some severe instances, such as if you do find a spy on comms. You want to go ahead and be able to ban them off the server immediately and get them kicked out of the corp. Dealing with friendly fire instances, and sometimes they happen, sometimes they don't.
Sorry, I'm late.
All right, at this time, I'm going to go ahead and open the floor up to a question and answer. What I would like you to do is please put an X in the lecture.e-uni channel. I will go ahead and call your name out. You can ask your question here on Mumble, and I will give you an answer. Let's go ahead and start that now. All right, Claudia, why don't you go ahead and ask your question here in the Mumble channel. Claudia is muted, so I will give you her question. What is the worst situation you had to face as an FC in a Nullsec op, if you've had any? Ooh, I've had a few instances where especially early in my FC career, where I've completely whelped a fleet due to either a bad decision on my part or even bad intelligence. Generally, every FC has had instances where the whole fleet has been completely, totally decimated, and everybody's gone back either in pods or found themselves directly back in station. It's unavoidable. Nobody's perfect. You just have to admit that to yourself and learn from your mistake and move on. All right, Reverend Apocalypse.
Yeah, the recon aspect of it. Can you give a little more detail without, like, compromising how you guys do things, like kind of what's expected and, a little more about where they make the marks, like how far, without getting yourself in trouble?
I can go ahead and give you some general ship types, and I can give you a little bit of generalized information on that. I believe that won't compromise anything. A lot of it is just common sense when working with recons. You want to go ahead and use either stealth bombers or your covert type ships. Those can use the Tech 2 covert ops cloaking device, allowing them to get into a system, cloak up, and work to various spots as needed. A lot of times we use them to set up escalation points, as I've said earlier, an initial warp in point for sovereignty structures or player-owned structures like the towers. When we hit the towers, we generally want to be out of weapon range. With the large guns, they can hit you out to 250 kilometers. Therefore, we try to set our safe spots beyond that 250-kilometer distance, sometimes even completely off-grid with a direct warp-in to the structure we're looking at. With gate camps, we generally tend to have safe spots 100 to 300 kilometers off the gate, sometimes even further. Preferable is even off-grid where they do not initially see you once they come in, and your covert ops will be anywhere from 100 to 250 kilometers directly off the gate on grid, and they can tell you when the enemy jumps in. That allows you to get your interdictors or heavy interdictors down there to bubble the incoming fleet, and allows your fleet to go ahead and come in at optimal distance of your weapons to immediately start the engagement.
Outstanding. Thank you.
Do we have any other questions?
Who's your favorite pony?
None of them.
I like Pinkie Pie.
Sir, who, in your opinion, is the best subcap large fleet commander in the game?
It's me.
DBRB.
Boat!
I've flown with multiple fleet commanders. A lot of times they're in different alliances, and I tend to have a lot of respect for different fleet commanders that I've come up against. I do have to say, yes, Mr. V is, just for utility aspect, he can take any fleet and make it successful. Along with that, DBRB, the Big Red Boat, ranks high on the list. I've flown with Philly and Goon Swarm. I'm actually pretty impressed with the way he runs his operations. A couple of the FCs here, even in test, I've flown under that I respect very highly with the way they run their fleets. My counterpart in Fleet Command, the Disto, runs some really good fleet ops. Along with that, there's a couple of FCs outside the Alliance that I've fought against that I have a lot of respect for and that I actually look forward to facing them on the field, like Elo Knight.
Come on.
Hey, you have to give it to Elo Knight. Even though they're very specialized and they tend to fly Munins quite a bit, the man has his tactics down. He knows what his ships can do, and he knows how to set up his fleet to get the maximum damage he can get.
And loses Titan.
Even though he's horrible at flying a Titan, and yes, we blew it up. All right, Varg, you had a question you'd like to ask?
No, that was my question.
Oh, okay. All right, Scottish Warrior had a question. Do you have any backup system or advice if the FC is a total disconnect and a fleet is left in a hostile situation? Generally, once we organize fleets and we see who's in it, we in test have other FCs available. We generally tend to ask for a backup FC, especially in times a lot of the well-known FCs. It's a tactic tend to get primaried by the hostile fleet, thereby denying your fleet of your advice directly on the field, whether it's losing your ship directly or getting potted back to station. A lot of times we have that designated FC, or in some instances we'll even have somebody go ahead and step up and take action and take control of the fleet immediately to try to either salvage the fight or get the fleet out, depending upon how the combat's going. Galistane, Candid, go ahead and ask your question.
How even are the fights in Nullsec PvP? Will you fight a fleet equal size to yours, or do you demand that you outnumber 2 to 1 or something?
With scheduled fleets, I mean, if it's a scheduled operation, you hope that you've brought the right ships, and no, there's no real number. It's kind of with that fight or flight thing. You have to apprise the situation as soon as it comes up. Depending on the fleet commander and how experienced they are, I mean, in one instance, just to say, I've seen Mr. V take out a fleet of 200 Drakes and totally mop up an opposing force that doubles or even triples his numbers. Other times you can have a fleet of 200 people, and if they bring in Tier 3 battlecruiser snipers and just have great warp-in spots and kite your fleet, they can decimate your numbers very quickly. So it's kind of a liquid thing. We'd like to see even number fights. We'd like to see the FCs go ahead and see who can get the tactical upper hand and who brought the right ship and who used the right tactics, but it's never a guarantee. You have to be ready for everything, and you have to be able to make the decisions to stand up to them or go ahead and retreat. All right, Titus, you got a question?
Are there any sort of personal repercussions for failures of a fleet op as the FC?
Yes, there are. You can go ahead and lose your standings. A lot of times, if you are a pretty bad FC and you end up getting a lot of fleets destroyed, you will find that when you do call for a fleet, you do not get the participation you want. It is almost literally up to your alliance mates how it happens. If you're a popular FC and you're successful, you're going to get large fleets. If you're an unpopular FC and you just can't get the grasp of the mechanics, even though I'll give them their props for going out there and trying time and time again, you will find that people will not go on your fleet. Test Alliance does not have a mandatory fleet participation. It's if you want to go on the fleet, join the fleet. Even though we encourage it during strategic operations to have all hands on deck, it's still always voluntary. There are alliances that have CTA call to arms or what they call red pen operations where it's mandatory participation. I've never really liked those fleets. I've never really saw much into that because you begrudgingly bring people along and they will find a way to get out of fleet or they will not fight effectively for you. DeMarcus, you had a question?
Yeah, what would be some good generic fleet compositions or like kitchen sink, and what are the typical numbers to start off in Nullsec FCing?
Drakes!
Drakes is a very popular one due to their high tank and high standoff damage. With heavy missile launchers and the proper skills, Drakes can project all the way out to a 75-kilometer area. Especially if you have your ships fitted right, you can kind of plug that huge EM hole in them. But Drakes are a great fleet to start out with. Along with that is small gang PvP, say anywhere from 10, 5, 10, even 20 people running a gate camp or a small roam. And test, we tell our guys, if you want to run a fleet and you want to run a small roam or a gate camp, speak up, get a hold of somebody, we'll broadcast it out there. You can use your Alliance channel or even your Corp channel in-game to try to garner support and get people into your fleets and start out. But I would definitely recommend doing the small gang PvP just to get yourself familiarized with going ahead and leading those fleets and working your way up from there into the larger fleets.
Another thing to keep in mind on why Drakes are a good fleet in medium to large size for newer FCs is because it doesn't really matter if you fuck up and land at 50 or land at 0, because there's no tracking components of missiles. You'll do the same sort of applicable damage no matter what range, as long as you can physically hit with the missile. So you don't have to worry so much about accurate warping mechanics and more just landing on grid and actually fighting.
Thank you very much for that, Durherder. And he is correct on that. Missile ships are a great way to start out as long as they're in the range of the missile itself. And you've got them targeted, it will hit. All right, question from Claudia. How shall a new player start to her FC career? It may turn into a traumatic situation to fail at her first FC try. Everybody fails at their first fleet commands. Everybody, even myself, just trying to work on small gang stuff or even up to large fleets. I would always suggest just going out and doing small roams. T1 frigate, small cheap cruiser class, or if you have the Alliance that will allow it, go and take some battle cruisers out and set up a gate camp with a anchored bubble or heavy interdictor available. All right, Zambo asks, what ratio of DPS logistics is optimal in a Drake fleet? I generally tend to look anywhere at the minimum 15% logistics. That would be, and we highly recommend using Scimitars over Basilisk just due to the chance that your Basilisk can get jammed, and they do require energy transfers between them even at a logistics level 5. Scimitars are an all-in-one ship. They can handle their own capacitor, and they can go ahead and send out reps to everyone. But for your general fleet comp, you want about 15% logistics, you want 50% high DPS or your directed DPS type. The other 35% I would mix in between fast tackle, some type of interdictors. Along with that, having some ECM on field is always a plus, even though they tend not to last very long. All right. Ajir asks, is there a popular ship type for FCs? Does the FC just do something they're good at or something that is likely to survive? It depends upon your situation. In the larger fleets and organized fleets, your FCs try to go ahead and fly command ships and make sure that there are command ships available to pass out the bonuses that these ships give you, either by mind link or by direct command link. Those are always a plus ship. They have a very high DPS and a very high resistance to them. If it's a FC that cannot do the command ships yet because they are extremely skill intensive and do take quite a while to train into, you generally want to try to look for something survivable. A brick tank Drake. That would be a Drake with multiple shield extenders and multiple hardeners on it, along with a good base recharge rate. So the biggest plus there is always, based on your fleet comp, you want something that's survivable. In the larger fleets, you do want to look at something, especially if you have the skill, that will give out the command link bonuses. All right, log in if you'd like to ask your question. And he's muted, so his question is, how often are Black Ops used to wreak havoc in enemy systems? One of the favorite tactics to soften a system up is to place a couple, 3, 4, sometimes even larger groups of stealth bombers in the system to, first off, put an economic impact on them. If you can't rat or mine, your economic scale goes down, especially with the sovereignty mechanics the way they are. If you have to abandon the system for 24 hours, you're losing all the system upgrades available. In fleet fights, we've actually had very good success, especially with our wars in the north, by having a secondary element in the standoff fleets where our stealth bombers will go in and drop void bombs, which sap capacitor, followed up by one of the damage-type bombs to sap away shields and armor. When done by an experienced bomber FC, they can do more, if not undeniably, completely.
Marek, you're breaking up.
I'm sorry, is that better?
Yep.
Okay, I'll bring up an instance where we were down in Providence working with Pandemic Legion, where we were going into a system for a final sovereignty timer, where we had our stealth bombers in system beforehand, and before the main fleet element could go ahead and jump into the system, our bomber wing had taken half of their ships out and had severely damaged the other half of the hostile fleet, where the battle was basically won as soon as we jumped in. It was a shooting gallery. The FC couldn't call targets fast enough. All right. P1U70. Question. Do you have any opinions on the coming recent changes to EVE and how they relate to Nullsec fleets that you would like to share, i.e. the rising role of subcaps, I guess that is? Is that correct? Well, with the Titan nerf that came into effect today, you probably will not see the Titans going directly on field to, as we like to say, blap the battleship fleets to all hell and back. Along with that, with the prior changes where they've taken out the use of drones completely from dreadnoughts, and the fact that they've limited the motherships to fighters and fighter bombers only, that has made a large impact. We have seen that in the fleet battles, where we do have a lot more subcap fleets and a lot larger subcap fleet battles. With the upcoming Titan nerf and the buff to dreadnoughts, we'll have to see how that works out. I'm actually very interested to see how taking off the tracking penalty to the siege module will affect upcoming combat with dreadnoughts on the field. Does that answer your question pretty well?
Yeah, Pluto says thanks. Good info.
Great. Do we have any other questions?
I have a question.
Go ahead.
In a fleet battle, as a noob or beginner, or what do you want to call it, is a rifter okay to bring?
Oh, we encourage our day one pilots. Test Alliance gives any pilot that requests it a free fitted rifter ready for combat, set up to tackle with the warp disruptor, warp scrambler on it. We love our rifter pilots. We really, really do. We've made some of our rifter pilots very, very rich, and they've become very well known for their actions. We had one rifter pilot named Evian Drinker that went in and tackled Tengus in a fleet and directly led to that fleet, that directly led to us getting an advantage in that. We love it. I mean, if you can go on YouTube and look at our videos, we love our Rifter bros. We want you in there. We, in any of our fleet compositions we use, Rifters and frigates are always welcome for our new pilots. We want you guys in there, especially if you're day one. Get in there. Find out what combat in Nullsec is all about. Even in a Rifter, one Rifter can change the battle. If he can get that tackle on there, that's one ship tackled. That's an immediate target.
You do not realize how important tackle actually is out there. Without tackle, we're useless.
Okay, thank you. I have 4 rifters all set up, ready to go.
By all means, bring them out. Go on fleets. Have fun. It's a cheap ship. It's, believe it or not, it's very survivable. I've led fleets and rifters and loved it. Just the rifter, and as you can see by CP's newest update with this expansion, they didn't change a thing with the rifter. They changed other ships, but the rifter is perfect as it is. It's a great platform, especially for stepping into fleet combat without putting a lot of ISK into it and getting out there and even learning about tackling or getting in and out of a fight very quickly.
Didn't Tess get like an award for making the most rifters?
The most rifter kills.
And losses.
Yep. We produced the most rifters in EVE for a 1-year period, and we had the most rifter losses in EVE for a 1-year period. But every one of them rifters we considered valuable and did a great job for our fleets.
One other question, if you don't mind.
Sure.
How do I know when there's fleets going on?
Fleet Finder, check your Alliance chat channel. If you have a Jabber or some type of IIRC client, they generally tend to be pinged through a broadcast there. A lot of times it's as simple as going into your Alliance forum and checking the calendar for upcoming events, or even checking your in-game calendar for upcoming fleets. It's important that FCs go ahead and post their fleets and broadcast them. You want maximum participation in your fleets. It's always advisable that you have overwhelming numbers when going into a fight. Always. Your whole job is to get in there and complete the task you're handed. And you want nothing better than to not only complete the task, but come back with a great battle report. All right. Do we have any other questions?
In your opinion, who sings the best when they've lemming ahead of the fleet?
That's kind of hard, but we've had some really good singers in test, and when I do make people sing, I generally tend to record it and post it on our forums. So there's some really good examples, and then there's some other examples where you go, oh my God, fingernails on a chalkboard type thing. But we always post them, and they always get either good or bad feedback. So it just depends on the person and the song. Personally, I like to, with who I'm dealing with, either give them an easy and hilarious, funny song, or give them something hard.
I always try to give them songs by Passion Pit because no one can sing that high.
Yep, each FC is different on what they do. I kind of stole the singing thing from the Big Red Boat because he has people do it on his fleets when they screw up in either lemming, which is do something without order. Usually it's jumping through a gate.
I usually just scream at people. I'm too lazy to record singing.
Yep, there are times where I've found myself getting extremely loud and profane with my fleets when they just don't want to listen, shut up on comms, or can't seem to follow orders. Along with that, there are just times when you got to yell at people to get in the right ship or get the hell out of fleet.
Channeling Graf Telkin.
I love Graf Telkin. Graf Telkin is one of the long-standing members of Pandemic Legion, and he's very well known for just losing it and uttering long, rambling sentences that contain multiple profanities. He'll make you feel bad.
Guy just loses his mind.
Oh, yes, he does. There are quite a few rants available on SoundCloud, or I think there's even a soundboard out there of Graf Telkin. Shadoo's also another really funny one. You do something wrong, boy, he's going to let you know, and the whole fleet will be laughing at you.
Armor Hex is probably the most famous one.
He does the same thing if you play Heroes of New Earth with him, too.
Do we have any other questions?
Is E-UNI allowed to join test fleets or ask their fleets?
Well, from what I understand, EV University is going to be running separate fleets due to their neutral stance. They're out here as a teaching and training exercise for them, where TEST has graciously given them standings to allow them to do this. I don't think there will be any cross-participation between the two. For further questions, I would go ahead and see those that are running the Nullsec campaign themselves and ask them about participation with test pilots or test fleets.
No, they're not supposed to be in test fleet.
Would the rule of engagement say that we can't fleet up with +5 and null?
Yeah, if it's something to do with the uni rules of engagement and all that kind of crap, then you're better off asking your own leadership than test leadership, because they're not really familiar with it.
Yeah, Yeah, we don't care. We go ahead and fly with anybody that we feel will be fun to fly with, and we'll even fly against anybody we feel will be fun to fight against. It's just a very easygoing, fun way to play. When it comes down to serious business, serious business. But any other time, it generally tends to be kind of have fun with it. Don't make it a rigid experience. Make your fleet something that's going to be enjoyable. I mean, there's nothing worse than sitting in a fleet for even 45 minutes to an hour and a half grinding a tower, shields down, and it's silent.
Question about Drake Fleet and ammunition.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Drake Fleet's bonus for kinetic, but in small rooms, we usually try to shoot for opposition resist hulls. What do you do in a large fleet fight? Do you shoot for the resist hulls, or just go with the bonus, or does the amount of DPS not matter?
A lot of times what we'll do is we'll go for the bonus. I mean, within your large fleets, especially organized fleets, they're going to try to plug that hole in some way or another, whether it's using rigs or using effective hardeners to plug that hole. You go with what your ship's bonused for. A lot of times you're going to find we use either the Faction Caldari Navy heavy missiles, or if you can, use the Furies, the Scourge Fury missiles, because you want that maximum damage. Even if they have a different hole, because they may have it plugged. It's best to go with what will give you the highest damage. I mean, there are times where, say, we're hitting a Caldari tower and they have a huge EM hole too and there's no hardeners on it. You may have the FC, since he has that prior recon knowledge, have the fleet go ahead and stock up on the T1 variant EM missiles just to make it go a little faster. But in a combat situation, you want to go with what your ship's bonus for. In the case of the Drake Faction or Tech 2 Fury, give that much better damage.
Even in most small fleets, PvP ships are usually fit so that their resists are pretty uniform, except for some snowflake T2 ships with T2 resists. So most of the time, you're almost always better to just go with whatever's highest on paper.
Yep, and I'd follow Dur's advice and recommend that. Dur tends to be more of the smaller fleet comps, where I tend to try to do more of the larger strategic operations. So any advice he has to give on top of mine is always good advice.
I have one more question about Drake Fleet.
Go ahead.
Perma MWD or some other fit for Drake Fleet?
We've worked with both, and it just depends on the situation. If you have the numbers and you know what you're going up against, especially when you're going up against a turret-type fleet, the Perma MWD gives a great trade-off. Speed versus having that huge sig radius sometimes is a plus. Irregardless, the Drake, once you add all the shield extenders and everything onto it, is going to be ballooned up hugely anyway. Just depends on the situations. I've become quite fond of running the MWD Drakes, but there's a spot for those regular, nice brick tank Drake fleets too. So that would be another thing where you would look at your intel, or you're looking at your fleet. If you know you're going to get 100 150, 200 people, sheer numbers, I'd go with MWD Drake. If you're going out in a small gang type thing, I would probably almost go with the better brick buffer tank over having an MWD, because if you're going to get tackled by a smaller ship, he's going to be going a hell of a lot faster than you anyways, and once that warp scrambler hits you, that MWD is shut off and you're immobile.
What would be the percentage to a perma Drake fleet and Logi? If we could do Logi up with the Drakes.
I go with the standard formula. I look for, at a minimum, 15%. In larger fleets, I'm looking for even better numbers, so I tend to try to go to 20-25% logistics over DPS. But you always want half your fleet composed of your high DPS, especially in strategic operations.
That's good. Yeah.
I mean, for test, we've stood fleets down because we haven't been able to get enough logistics. It's all the FC's call. Personally, I'd rather have enough, if not more logistics, leaning toward that 25% versus, say, having 70 Drakes in fleet and only 6 or 7 Scimitars. It just does not work out well.
Yeah, like, I personally subscribe to the more is better philosophy. If I could fly a 200-person fleet of all Scimitars, I would.
We'll have to try that sometime and see how it goes.
Boat did it. It did not go well.
Yeah, I know. I saw. Great comedy. Makes your enemy look at you and go, what the hell? But that's a really expensive fleet to lose out.
We had an incursion fleet get the hell blasted out of it by like a 20-man Onero's gang in Nullsec once. It was really stupid.
Yeah, that's where you file that under special snowflakes. Do we have any other questions? All right, at this point, I'll go ahead and turn it over to Neville. I would like to go ahead and say again, thank you, E-UNI University, for giving me this chance to go ahead and lecture you. And I'd like to personally go ahead and thank all my support from Test Alliance who showed up to listen to me today.
Get out, Merrick.